Episode 107, IRONMAN 70.3 Santa Rosa with Coach Adam Zucco. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the pursuit of the perfect race. Today I have the pleasure of talking to my friend Adam Zucco about his recent race experience at IRONMAN 70.3 Santa Rosa, where he had a time of 3:57.13. This race took place on July 29th, 2018, and the temperature on race day was 52 and rose to 87, and where the swim was canceled. Adam has been doing triathlons for nearly 20 years and is the owner and head coach of Superfly Coaching. Welcome to the show, Adam. I look forward to hearing about your race experience at Santa Rosa 70.3.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome. I look forward to diving in about your experience here and learning a little bit more from you.
Done. One thing I'm good at is talking, so you might have to just put me on mute every once in a while.
Awesome. So what made you want to do Santa Rosa this year, man?
Oh, I mean, clearly 2 words, Napa Valley. So, in all seriousness, it's been an interesting couple of years for me, and I've recently moved to Florida, so I couldn't have found, I guess I could have found a further race, but at least in the continental United States, I couldn't have found a further race. And I just had some clients that had invited us to go out to do the race. I had never done it. And they said that they have some amazing connections at some vineyards. And they kind of locked me in at that point, to be honest with you. So we went out there, new experience. I always love going somewhere new and trying new experiences. So yeah, it would just ticked all the boxes.
Nice. So how was your training going into this race? Were you coming off of a previous race, or was this your main race of the season? What was that like?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how much you want to get into this, but my training this year has been different than it's ever been, in that I used to train extremely diligently. And I mean, I definitely still do, but as we were talking about before, I had surgery on both my heels. It took me down for about a year. And so my training had to radically change, when I started to get back and really think about things in new perspectives. And then just as I started to get my feet, no pun intended, under me there, we went ahead and threw in a new wrench where we moved to Florida, which I used to coach some athletes down here. In fact, I still do. And they would talk about the heat, and I'd kind of roll my eyes. But let me tell you, dude, it is hot down here, And so I had the surgeries, I had the new training environment, and then I had also, when I was down on my surgery time, other things kind of flood into my life that have become as important to me as well. And so I've had the new challenge of trying to balance all those new things and train for the first time being healthy again, which I'm very appreciative for. But also not hold myself accountable to what I used to do, if that makes sense, And so it's been a year of learning. So if you ask me how my training was going, and like I said, I like to talk. So the longest answer I could give to you was, I really didn't know going in. I was on totally new ground. I was training mainly inside, or I was training in an environment where I literally couldn't finish some of my runs because I was so hot and dehydrated. And I've had to put some faith in things that I haven't had to put in. And then, like you said, the race started at 52 degrees, which was totally different than 97 and 90% humidity. And, so I don't know how to answer that question, to be totally honest.
Going into this race, the previous 5 weeks before the race, what was your longest swim, bike, and run workouts?
So I am fortunate enough to live next to Sarasota Sharks. They're coached by a guy named Dave Miner, who we swim 4,000 to 5,000 basically every day, a lot of times long course. So I've always been a strong swimmer. I've become even a stronger swimmer now. So I swim every day, at least during the week, 4,000 to 5,000 yards. Okay. My longest bike before my surgeries, I mean, dude, I would have weeks where I would do 2 5-hour rides in a week, and those were just not even, I would ride 20 hours a week. Now I my longest ride, I've hit 60 miles a couple times, and most of it's been indoors.
Okay.
And ironically, I live next to Matt Russell now too, and he trains a lot indoors too, you know, so it's just been a really new experience for me on a lot of different levels.
Okay.
My longest run was 12 to 13 miles.
Okay. Now, what was the most hours that you trained in 1 week in the previous 8 weeks going into this race?
For this race, I would say probably 25 hours a week. But remember, I have like 7-8 hours of swimming right off the bat.
Right.
You know,
this is going to dive down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I think you can handle it.
Yeah.
As volume increases and intensity increases, how do you mitigate the risk of injury and you prevent injury as much as you can?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I feel like I specialize as a coach is I'll have a lot of athletes come to me that are chronically injured, and I'm able to help them. So I don't want to say my athletes never get injured, because clearly that happens once in a while, but it's rare. And I think that balancing the right intensity with the right volume is critical. And then placing that is so important to where it presents itself in the schedule, that if you know how to fix those puzzle pieces together in the right order, you can push your body to different levels if you know exactly how, you know, like, for example, physiologically, people will go do a long day, right? Let's just say, and then the next day they'll say, I'm going to go train hard on tired legs. Okay. I would make the argument psychologically, sure, there's some adaptation that can come from that. There's definitely, but physiologically, you can negate up to 65% of the actual scientific benefits that happen from the long day the day before. So if you go out and train too hard within 24 hours of having that adaptation process complete itself. So being able to place those things in the right order, I think it's extremely critical. But how I measure intensity, one of the things that I do is a lot of talks on how to get intensity right, because I believe if you do one thing correctly as an athlete, you have to get intensity right, because intensity, it's not just about how hard you swim, bike, and run. It's about what muscle fibers you're using, how much recovery goes into each of those, what types of fuels you're burning, the energy demands, that all that stuff. So again, long answer to your question, but balancing the right intensity at the right time, I think is huge.
Right. Now, so based on what you said, you're not a big proponent of doing the long run after a long ride the previous day.
No, that's not necessarily true. It's just a matter of you have to, I'm not a big proponent of having one system for every athlete I coach, if that makes sense.
That does.
And depending on the athlete that you're coaching, whether they're really busy or maybe they're injury prone, I might have that athlete do the long run in the middle of the week, or maybe they're not injury prone, but they're just not running well off the bike. And it's because they're always doing their quality run. And if you're doing Ironman, your long run kind of is your sport specific quality run. You're always doing it in a fatigued state. So you're not giving yourself the opportunity to go out and execute that run efficiently. Right. But it also, you have to balance that too with practical experience too. And you are going to start that marathon or those half marathons off the bike in a fatigued state. And you also need to be able to learn how to deal with that as well too. So it just really, really depends. You might do, for example, your long run the day after the day after the bike with not a lot of intensity. Maybe it's just getting out there and getting the body and the soft tissue conditioned for that, where maybe you throw in a mid-long run where you're getting your main focus done for your intensity, there too. So there's so many ways to skin the cat. That's what I love about coaching is, I always laugh because I used to live in Chicago, and, you see like 40,000 people doing the Chicago Marathon, and you see 3 basic plans that they send out to everybody. And he's like, you're telling me all 40,000 people fit into one of these 3 plans? Like, no way, like, for example, like, again, here we go on the rabbit hole. I found, having done my surgery, that a lot of people are trying to correct their run form, right? And I'm sure you've heard this, right? Like tuck the hips, and, you want to have the right forward lean, but not too much forward lean. And you want to lean from the ankles and, all this stuff, right? The hardest thing sometimes getting athletes to do is getting them to translate what you're saying to actually what it feels like. Well, I can tell you this. One is, if you're going to walk in your marathon, which a lot of people, let's face it, are probably going to walk in their marathon, you use 65% different muscles than you do walking. So if you don't train the walk, I was thinking about this because I went through this right before my heel surgery. I was getting passed by these old ladies that were walking probably 4 or 5 minutes per mile faster than me. And I'm not making light of that. But if you add that up over 10 or 15 miles, that's over an hour of difference when it comes to, so if you're going to plan on walking, maybe the long run off the bike day, you want to add some walk breaks in there to at least train for that. Or what I found is walking at 12% incline on the treadmill, actually you feel, one, it's going to help you correct your run form because it's going to make you engage more glutes and hamstrings and take the pressure off your quads, hip flexors, and calves. So if you've been dealing with a lot of those issues, it's going to help you teach that. But your natural tendency is to bend over at the waist to make those, that incline feel less steep. But that's the perfect time to tuck your butt, almost like someone's going to come give you a poke in it, or like you're trying to hold bathroom in, and feel what it's like to stand up tall when you're at that 12% incline, because it translates perfectly the next time you go out and run, and it gives you the opportunity to feel that. So one of the things I did about my last live is you need to step back and ask yourself more questions sometimes. Why? Why am I doing this? What is it I'm trying to accomplish, right? So if you're somebody who, like, for example, one, I would need to know more about that athlete.
Right.
So if you're going to be out there for 17 hours, like my dad used to tease me, he says, look, man, I'm a completer, not a competer. Right.
Right.
So we would literally have days where he would do stuff like that. And in between he'd go garden or mow the yard, or because he has to just get conditioned to be moving for 17 hours. He used to tease, how am I going to do that without taking a nap?
Right.
And so so I mean, that, as crazy as it sounds, is sport specific to his day. He's not on lactate threshold or 80% for like holding all what I mean?
And data doesn't really matter to him. So you don't have to say, hey, look, I want you at this heart rate for this long because this is part of your VO2 max or lactate threshold.
Right.
He doesn't give a shit about those numbers.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it really, really depends on the athlete and their experience and what their injuries have been and what they're trying to accomplish. So, I mean, would I have a professional athlete do that? No, probably not, because they're, but it would really depend.
Right.
So sorry.
And as far as going into this race and you train 25 hours a week, were there any days where you just mentally didn't want to train?
You know what? That's a really, really, really interesting question, because for the last year and a half, I haven't been able to train because of my injuries. And, I want to say, I say this humbly, I think in 2012 or something like that, I was ranked number 1 for 70.3 in my age group. That being said, some of the guys I was ranked over kicked my ass several times in 70.3. So it was just a matter of I had more points or showed up to. But at the point is I've been at the front end of the spear, and now it's been an adjustment coming back because I haven't had to just adjust my desire and this training schedule back into my life, but a little bit of my expectations of what those training results are going to be every day. And one of the things that I really say to my athletes and my coaches that work with me is, if you can keep people seeing progression and progress, they're going to stay motivated. And it's been a little bit unusual for me because everything I'm doing right now is something I used to do 10 years ago, and I'm trying to figure out what it is I could come back to. And then it kind of gets discouraging too, because it's like, man, I know how long I had to work to get through that last time. And now I'm different after the surgery. I don't know if I can get better. So to answer your question, there's a lot of days where it's like, man, I don't really feel like doing that, or I could easily justify not. So
how did you get past those?
Yeah. So I always tell my athletes, think about two things. And this sounds really silly, but it really works for me. I imagine myself on the starting line, because every time I've towed the line, I know that I'm happy that I did do the work. And I remember that feeling and that confidence that I'm going to feel and that desire. And then the other thing too is I tell myself or my athletes, just do 9 minutes. If after 9 minutes you feel like you don't want to do this workout anymore, you might legitimately be tired and need some extra rest. Or more times than not, they feel okay after it. A lot of time it's just getting started,
Where did you come up with the 9 minutes at?
What's that?
Where did you come up with the 9 minutes at?
You know what? I don't even remember, to be honest with you. I've been doing this for so long. I've been saying it for so long. Maybe because 10 seemed like too much, and 9 was the biggest single digit. I mean, literally, I don't. And if your coach doesn't tell you, sometimes they're pulling shit out of their ass, then they're lying to you, But yeah, it's just like, to me, it was always like, what I found was I'd spend so much time hemming and hawing over the workout that if I had just gone out there and started, I'd be halfway through the damn thing. And so that was always like my thing. Like, okay, let's think about if we want to do this while we're getting started. If you still don't want to, then, you know, we can kind of turn around. But at least if you do, you're almost done, you know?
Right. Now, as far as going into this race, what workouts did you do that gave you the confidence to know that you could not only complete the race, but do your best that you could on that day?
You want my honest answer?
Sure. Yes.
I didn't do a single workout that let me feel like I was confident to do that, like, except for Gulf Coast. I was coming from a place that so in 2015, I really needed my Achilles surgery and it was definitely time, you know? And so consequently, I had pretty much all negative feedback from the sport, which, you know, because every time you're going out there, you're walking and you're in extreme pain. Then I went and did 70.3 last year, and even an Ironman, because I thought I was going to get right back into it. But I did 70.3 Wisconsin last year, and my plan was to just do the swim and the bike because I hadn't ran more than 4 miles in a year and a half. I came off the bike, I think 10 minutes in front of second place with a police escort. So I felt really like, what am I going to do? Not start the run? You know, like literally the sirens are waiting for me. Like everybody
here at Santa Rosa.
No, this was a Ironman 70.3 Madison.
Oh, okay.
And so I started it, you know, and I was lucky enough that I barely beat my bike time on the run by the time it was all done, you know, so another kick in the nuts type thing, you know, and then I moved down here essentially, and it was super hot, and it got to the point, St. Anthony's this year, I was walking and I'm like, there's something wrong here. There's something that I'm missing, you know, and I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out what is it I'm missing about my training in this new environment, being that it's so hot all the time. And it's so, you know, and, so I did go to Gulf Coast, and I think I was in the top 10 overall at Gulf Coast. So that gave me some confidence. So I had confidence knowing that I could do it from Gulf Coast. But then from there too, like I haven't had anything that I would say was, I did a Fort DeSoto race, which was an Olympic distance. I got second overall there a couple weeks before, but nothing about my training this year has been traditional in terms of what I've been doing. And so what gave me the confidence was learning from a lot of athletes that I've really respected over the years, and the mental aspect of how you set up the day and how you approach the day is so critical to your success. And so I just tried to roll with it and trust that my experience would kind of get me through.
Okay. Now, to transition a little bit about the actual race we're talking about about Santa Rosa 70.3. What was your taper like going into this race?
It was pretty traditional. I have a taper that I do, that I execute pretty much every 70.3. For me, I believe that rest is important. What I have found is that rest is just as important for me as it is for anyone else. When I need that rest, it's pretty different though. So I tend to rest the week before the race, and then my body works better if I have a little bit of a rhythm going into the race. So I'll tend to rest a little bit the week before, and then give myself 3 or 4 days, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or something like that, where I'm kind of punching the system a little bit too, to kind of retweak it. And then I'll let it rest again. But I have to do kind of like a staggered rest for myself going into these races to feel in rhythm.
What does a staggered rest taper look like for you?
So like, let's just start off maybe the Friday before. It might be pretty light. The Saturday before the race, I'll do a pretty race specific type brick, or I'll do a local group ride that's about 2 hours of solid riding with a short runoff. I then taper. I usually run 2 hours or so on Sunday. So I'll do 75 minutes to 90 minutes then on the Saturday. On the Monday before, I usually like to do some hill repeats on the bike, hit some activation stuff. You know, I'm swimming pretty much every day. I kind of base my swims off feel. I run pretty easily on the Monday before, and then I'm not afraid to do, I do like a triple brick on the Tuesday before. And so Tuesday, I'm usually pretty tired where
so
I'm doing
bike run.
I run bike, no, bike run, bike run, bike run. And,
okay.
Yeah. And so I do it from my house. You know, I do a little warm up, and then I'm doing like 10 or 15 minutes efforts on the bike, and then a mile run. And I'll repeat that 3 times. So It's nothing crazy. Again, it's making
Keeps
sure
the
you're
leg
hitting
fresh, get the turnover that you want.
Exactly. The runs, having the bike as a break between the runs makes it so that the run's it's different than a 3-mile straight effort, so muscularly I can recover from it, but it's making me feel fresh and fit and light a little bit. And then based on how I'm feeling, and if it's a Saturday race or a Sunday race, I'll adjust Wednesday going forward. But here's what I'd say I'm a little different. The day before the race, I definitely need to do some efforts on the bike. It helps me get rid of any rust that I might feel. I never want to do it, but I always do a 10-minute effort at the intensity that I want to do the next day within my ride. And then I do a couple little 1-minute hit outs type thing. And then that ride might fluctuate between 30 and 45 minutes or, depending on what I'm training for. For this race, it was 45 minutes. And then I'll get off and do a little bit of a run, maybe 10 minutes. And then I'll do a little bit of dynamic warm up too. I don't really stretch, but to me, I'm trying to utilize all my muscle fibers. I think in word pictures, and in my mind, I think about our muscle fibers being like a new balloon, right? And the first time you try to blow air into that balloon, it might be resistant to letting, the flow of air come in. And so I view in my mind, even though it's probably not the right picture, but it works for me, our muscle fibers and my aerobic system kind of being that same thing. And I want to have used it a little bit the day before so that, and even the morning of, I hit it a little bit just so that when I get to the bike and I get to the run and the swim or whatever, it's not the first time
that
what those fibers
like.
are. Yeah. And so it's kind of like it's in a little flow, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when did you start traveling from Florida all the way to California?
Yeah. So this was a unique race because I wasn't kidding. It really was more about the enjoyment after the race. So we tried to cut it as close to the race as possible. So I think we went out there on Friday, got in the night before, the day before the race. So I think it was a Sunday race. It was a Saturday. So we went out there on Thursday. And so all day Friday was about setting up the transition and stuff. I was actually super relaxed, which is something that I'm learning to be a little bit more of, to the point that, I had Tri-Bike Transport bring my bike out there for me. And then we were staying in Sonoma Valley. So it was like 30-minute drive to the race. And then they're like, oh, you got to take your bike up to the transition. I'm like, how far is that? They're like 50 minutes in the other direction. I'm like, or they can pay you can pay them $40 and they'll do it for you. I'm like, done.
But I just paid you.
Yeah.
To bring my bike all the way from Florida and you can't bring it another 50 miles.
I know. But it's like, to this point, I make the joke that I heard there's a Russian river there. I have yet to see it, which I'm sure we'll get into, but I never saw it the day before. There was so much fog the morning of. Theoretically, I rode over it on the bridge, but I'm not even sure that there is actually a body of water there. So,
well, I saw when I was up there for the full, so I know it exists.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I'll have to trust you on that one. But so I was super relaxed the day before and just tried to let, just kind of just trying to tell myself, like, I only have so much energy, right? And so how would I want to spend that energy on, at this point?
Okay. Now, were you trying to get a certain meal in the day before the race?
So every time, nutrition's very important subject to me, but every time I try to eat super healthy the day before the race, I end up bonking. So,
what do you mean?
So anytime I used to weigh 245 pounds. Right. And when I taper, I have to fight the feeling of feeling bloated and feeling overweight. And if I'm honest with everybody, every time I look in the mirror, whether I'm super fit or not, I still see 240, right? So for me to not work out or to let my body have some of that rest, I know I'm good at doing it, but at the same time, it's mentally a struggle. So when I'm not working out that much, I feel like sometimes I have to fight the urge to limit calories or eat more like salads or, like the lean proteins. But I have to remind myself that I've never felt overweight coming off the bike, right? And so making sure that I get the caloric needs in that I need the day before and, simple sugars. And for me, so cutting to the chase, what always works for me for a half Ironman is I have something simple like a turkey sandwich for lunch, white bread, none of this fluffy stuff or I just went straight up white bread, turkey, cheese, side of chips or pretzels, like literally just something super simple. I don't want to make my gut have to work any harder than it has to assimilate those calories. And then the night before the race, I have a big bowl of pasta with some chicken and a little bit of broccoli on the side to hopefully make me, go to the bathroom in the morning before I leave. And I have a very funny story about that, I think, but for another race. But yeah, that's what I do. And then I do that every time. Every time I do that, I race well. Every time I try to deviate from that, it's up in the air.
Okay. So whenever you got everything checked in at the transition one, being that this is a split transition race, where were you? Were you staying in Santa Rosa, or were you staying up towards the race start?
Opposite direction of both. So
okay,
we had to drive. We had to drive 30 minutes into the Santa Rosa to catch the bus, and then
and there's no air conditionings in that city either.
You didn't need it though. It was like cold in the morning. Like it was, because remember it started in the mid 50s. So that was fine. And I tend to sleep hot. And so I like sleeping with the air really cold at night. And, so I was fine with that. But yeah, so we were staying in the opposite direction.
Okay. Now, what time did you go to bed the night before the race?
I have trouble going to bed, which is one of the reasons why I like doing the West Coast races, because I have the luxury of being 3 hours ahead. So, I think we went to bed at 9, which felt like midnight for me. So it's kind of perfect, So, so that wasn't really a big deal.
Okay. And what's your alarm set for?
I always say to myself, I'm either going to wake up early and stressed or early and relaxed. Either way, I'm waking up early. So I try to get, this one we were kind of limited because we had to get to the buses, right? So I want to say it was like 3 o'clock, because by the time we drove to the bus, we had to be at the bus by like whatever time it was. And then, but in a traditional race, I'll usually set it for about 3 hours before the race start. Okay.
So what's your race day morning ritual like before you actually leave your Airbnb or hotel?
I usually on purpose don't pack the car because I want to get some movement, because I'm trying to go to the bathroom and all that other stuff. And I have 2 of my shakes that I drink, and I actually have some coffee and that kind of stuff. And then I always have a Snickers too. So it's just something that works for me. It's like, yeah, I like it. I know I'm going to burn it today, and why not,
Gotcha. Now, whenever you actually started going over to the buses and then you had to take the bus all the way up to the start line,
yeah,
did you know at this point that the swim might be canceled?
No, I had no idea. Honestly, I have to be honest with you. I did, because this was more of a vacation for me, I did zero course reconnaissance on this course. Like literally zero. And so I'm sitting on the bus, literally playing that game 2048 or whatever on my phone, just like trying to keep my mind.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
and
the squares.
And I'm listening to these 2 guys talk to me about how triathlon's not important to them, and how they think triathletes are crazy to wake up early to try to do this stuff. And I'm just thinking, like, you're on this bus with me. What are you talking about? And so, but I'm listening to them talk about the course. And so I'm gathering all my course information from these 2, and I'm listening to them, and I'm hearing that there might be hills, and like, cause again, I haven't ridden the course because I didn't take my bike up there. I was staying in the opposite direction.
And you knew nothing about the course.
Nothing, but I'm just like, and I still tell my athletes, like, my tactics don't really change for the course. Just like if we went out for a ride and all of a sudden you had a hill, like, what would you do? You deal with it just like you would the first time you see a hill. It's not like, oh, I have to plan for this ride that I'm going to go do with Adam and there might be a hill, but it's like sometimes triathletes get so much up in their own head that it makes them nervous. It's like, look, you got the power meter, you know how you're supposed to feel, or your heart rate, or your breathing, or whatever when you come to whatever it is that you're dealing with, just deal, So I had no idea. Someone had told me that there might be fog. I did overhear that on the bus going up, but I was just like, all right, whatever, we'll figure it out when we get there,
Right. Now, whenever you got to transition, how much PSI are you using in your wheels?
I use 105.
Okay. And you're using
tubulars too.
Okay, you're using tubulars?
Yeah.
And you have a Trek, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, on your Trek, do you have digital shifting, or are you just using the manual?
I do. I have electronic shifting on the Trek, and I love it. I've been offered to ride other bikes throughout the years, and to me, the Trek is the best bike for anything you want to do, whether it's descending or time trialing or whatever. It just works really well, and so yeah.
Okay. Now, whenever you get to transition, you realize, hey, it's a little foggy here. There might not be a swim. Did you have that thought?
So the biggest question was, is it going to be wetsuit or non-wetsuit? So of course, because you have to bring both in that regard. So you bring both. And then I had heard that at this point that they were going to wait an hour to see if the fog was going to clear up. And then the options were they were going to do the whole swim, or they were going to do the half a swim, or they were going to do no swim. And this was, I think, at 6 o'clock, and they were going to let us know at 7 o'clock. And then they were going to delay the start, whatever their decision was, for 30 minutes. And they said there would be no decision made, though, until 7 o'clock. And then 3 minutes later, they said, okay, we've already eliminated the one swim. I'm like, okay, that was a short 1 hour wait, and it was kind of a bummer because I've been swimming really well. And I don't want to say that the guys that beat me wouldn't have beat me if there was a swim, but I can tell you that I was ready to swim, And at that point, though, I was just kind of like, I just honestly wanted the swim canceled because, like, I was talking to T.O., who I'm pretty good friends with, and I'm like, okay, for 1,000 swim, it's like, we're just going to be cold and wet now. Might as well just ride, So I was kind of relieved at that point when they said no swim, because it was just at that point just less admin.
Were you already in your wetsuit at that point?
No, I did not put my wetsuit on. I had a feeling based on how thick the fog was. I'm like, there's no way. And they made the right call. It would have been very dangerous to put people in the water. I mean, Ironman, probably popular belief it was not, but it was absolutely the right call.
Okay. Now, were you getting, okay, what was your bib number at this point?
Oh man. I want to say 128 or something like that.
Okay, so you were towards the front of the pack then.
Yeah, I was in the AWA thing, and
okay, that's why I was asking about your bib number, because they went by bib number to tell where you were going to start, and
yeah,
so you kind of had a rough idea that you were going to be one of the first couple hundred people on the bike course at this point, right?
Yeah, and because too that had happened to me at Racine the year before, I knew that it really didn't matter what order you started in, as long as when your chip crossed, you could. And I was telling my poor friend who was 3,000, I'm like, dude, just come up, because he's a very good athlete too. He just registered late, but he did it by the rules. But yeah, and so I was kind of lining up, and I knew a couple of the guys there from racing, and someone's like, oh, that guy just won an Ironman, and he's pretty good. I didn't know where, I didn't really know too much about him yet because I've been out of the sport for I'm like, cool, I'll get behind him, and I'll try to mark this dude for this. So I kind of just set myself behind him on the start line.
Okay. Now, did you get any type of last minute nutrition before the bike ride that you wanted to get on? Or get in?
No,
get on.
Yeah. No. I mean, my nutrition is pretty standard across the board. And so the fact that we didn't swim and the race was only delayed 30 minutes, it was kind of like same thing, because it was like I would have otherwise just been swimming at that point.
Okay. Now, you finally get everything ready to actually leave on the bike. You're lining your bike up and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
What type of helmet are you using?
I have the Bontrager. They're going to kill me. I don't know. I can't think of the name of it because I've had it a few years, but it's the Aero Road helmet one. I really like that one a lot. Yeah. Okay.
Now, are you using a visor or are you using sunglasses?
I just go sunglasses. Yeah. It just seems to work for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you get out on the bike ride. How did you want to tackle this bike ride? Did you have a power number based off your FTP you wanted to hit? Or were you really just going off of, you know what, I'm just going to do this because I have to do this at this point because it's all about the vacation?
Yeah, well, no. So, when I think I've been in the top 4 or 5 off the bike at Hawaii several times. And I think whenever the world was in Mont Tremblant, I think I had the fastest age group bike split. I'm pausing because I don't know if that, anyway, in the conversation. So I feel like the bike is one of the things that, at least before my surgery, I used to be really good at. And so how I would set up all my bikes is I would kind of take inventory of the course and what the times were in the course for years prior. It would allow me to kind of think about how I wanted to attack the course in terms of I have to break the course up into 15-minute little increments and make sure that I'm staying on target. And I balance that with how am I feeling and what power numbers am I seeing. I also believe that riding around other people is definitely motivating, especially if you know that they're of similar skill level. And so I balance all those things every single time I do my rides. And so when this person told me that this guy's super good, he started 10 seconds in front of me. And honestly, like, don't get me wrong, I hate cheaters. Like, I don't understand what the gratification is for cheating and any result. But, you know, to say that you never queue off other riders, I'm never going to say I wouldn't do that. And so I'm like, it took me like a mile just to close the gap, so to say, on this guy for 10 seconds. I'm like, damn, like, this guy's riding hard, you know? And like in the first couple of miles, we're going up this hill and I'm looking down, I'm seeing almost 500 watts and I'm thinking, this is rich, you know? I don't really know, like, this can't keep going on, you know? And then I went to the front at that point to try to get rid of a couple people that were with us, and I got rid of all but two. But looking back on my power numbers, the whole time I'm riding for the first 30 minutes, I'm breathing really hard. Like, all the sensories that I'm used to taking into account, I was way over budget. But I was making a conscious decision to have a race, you know, and kind of decide, you know, based on my years of experience, like, I could course correct. But I was thinking, like, this can't be, like, I'd be following, and I didn't want to just be the guy that followed the whole time. So I would say, okay, I'm going to go to the front and, like, lead for a little bit. But I'd already be doing like 350 watts a few yards back. And so for me to like ride hard enough to surpass him in the allotted time and then like not make it so he had to just pass me right back, it was like huge effort. And so the first 30 minutes, I think we averaged 250 or 352 watts. God. And then our first hour and 45, we were at 327 watts, which is about 20 watts better than my ever best wattage that I have. Now, I was also taking into account that it was cool. And so I knew that I had, in cool environments, I had a little more leeway to kind of, you know, balance that. And where that backfired on me is from coming from Florida. I'll go out for runs where I'll lose 9 pounds. And so my body gets so good at retaining water now because of the heat that I train in that I had to start taking leak, you know, at like an hour and 45 minutes. And I knew that as soon as I did light up on the pedals at all, those guys are going to leave me. But, and that's what happened. But that was cool, you know, whatever. I still averaged like 305 watts, which I would have never told myself going in would have been okay. But at the same time too, it's like that balancing act with athletes that it's like, I try to tell them all these things need to teach you what it should feel like to do what you want to do. And by definition, when you have a PR, you're going to go do something that you've never done before. So sometimes you need to get out of your own way and allow your body to do what it's trying to tell you it can do that day, you know, and not overthink it. So, yeah.
Okay. Now, as far as the bike goes, did you see a lot of flats, mechanicals? Did you see any wrecks? I know the first mile or so is literally right down a mountain.
Yeah, I was second off the bike, so I didn't really see much of anything. Anybody who started in front of me, I passed him pretty much in the first mile. This guy, Dirk, who I later found out almost won the overall amateur at Kona last year. He rode 440 and then ran 3 hours. So that's who I was riding with. He was an amazing athlete. He ended up getting a mechanical, I would say, with 5 miles left because I passed him on the side of the road, and I felt terrible for him because he was like, the guy was legit, man. Like, my hat is off, and he left me on, I guess, the descent on Chalk Hill where the road was just super sketchy and full of potholes and roughness. And I don't know. I just didn't want to crash. So I let him get about 100 yards in front of me. And then I was able to hold that for several miles after. But I mean, the guy was like solid, but I felt bad. He had the mechanical. I know Lindsay Corbin, who I'm also friends with, she had an issue with her aero bars. So she had to pull over and have issue with that too. And, but those are the two mechanicals I saw. Okay.
Now, whenever you got to the last, say, 5 to 10 miles of the bike ride, you're about 45 miles in. Where's your head at? Do you have any dark places that you're at, or are you just really going as hard as you can at this point to make it hurt as hard as you can handle it?
No. I mean, honestly, at that point, because now at this point, I'd let them go because I peed. And I was riding by myself, and I ironically had passed Lindsay because she must have gotten her bars sorted out. But at that point, I start doing the math in my head, like, okay, I have probably 15 minutes left of riding at this point. I can turn myself inside out and gain 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds, or I can just kind of like ride comfortably steady tempo. And, you know, I don't necessarily light up, but I'm not trying to or lighten up, but I don't try to like push it in hard either. I just try to stay relatively steady, maybe err on the side of a bit light going in, but pretty steady.
Okay. Now, as far as the bike course goes, is there anything that you would tell someone to be aware of that hasn't done this course before?
It's super bumpy. Like the roads were super crap, to be honest with you.
Really?
I mean, the scenery was
Florida.
beautiful. Yeah, no, I mean, our roads here are amazing, dude. I have to say, like silk in most places. But there was like, I felt bad. I had a couple of light girls that I coached, like, 115 type pounds. And if you're super light, I think you're going to get bounced around a lot, and staying focused in the rough sections and maintaining aero and learning that sometimes spinning isn't the best thing, because actually carrying a bigger gear through there might actually create a little bit of separation between your butt and the seat, just a little bit. So learning just to hold aero and not get distracted or unfocused in those times, I think could make minutes of difference on your bike.
So staying aware of your surroundings, staying on point, and don't get lost in your own mind.
Exactly. Yeah. Cause it's easy to get discouraged. Be like, man, this sucks. It's like throwing me all over the bike,
Right. Now, you use how much PSI again?
105, but that's one of the reasons I also use tubular. Like, we could argue about which one's faster, but I'm like, the odds of me getting a flat on a tubular are so much less likely that I don't have to worry about it. Knock on wood, I've never had a flat in the race. And, I put the stand sealant in there, so if it gets a little something, it usually seals it up. And, I want to say, I guess now I'm thinking about it, I had one flat in a race because I accidentally brought a clincher, but yeah, it's just one of those things, where it's just like, yeah, that's just, I use 105 and it works well for me, it works really well.
Okay. And how much were you on race day? How much did you weigh on race day?
I'd say plus or minus 160.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how many calories do you feel like you took in per hour on the bike?
300 to 350.
Okay. That's a pretty standard answer, honestly.
Yeah.
And for this, did you use your disc?
No, I didn't, because I didn't want to put it on tri-bike transport or pay the extra money. And again, going back to, it wasn't a super high priority race for me. I'm just like, screw it. I'll just use the rear 9 or whatever it was.
Okay. So tri-bike transport would charge you extra for a disc?
Yeah, because you got to get a wheel bag, because you're not really supposed to put the disc on the bike, because they don't want it to get knocked or damaged. So you're supposed to put it in a wheel bag, which is like an extra $50. So,
because they can't take care of the bike?
Yeah, I don't know. Cause I guess they're worried about them smashing together and then it putting like a hole in your disc. So, yeah. So I was just like, and so then I also put in the special needs bag or whatever. So, I mean, at this point I was already like $400 into my bike transportation. So I'm like, with as much training that's been sporadic lately, like the disc isn't going to be the deciding factor for me. You know what I mean? So
right.
It's like, so I was just going to go out there and use this.
Okay. Now then, the last, say, mile before you get to transition, are you doing anything in those last 2.5, 3 minutes to prepare you to start running?
I'm just trying to, I always have an opportune time to take my my shoes off. At a safe opportunity. I tend to have to Scott, my partner, in coaching and my other podcast I do, teases me because I go to the bathroom a couple times, but I'm like, okay, can I take a leak before I get off this bike, or should I just do it in transition? And then I always have to get a little discouraged right now because my transitions are a little slow, especially when I'm barefoot, because of my Achilles surgery. It's just really hard for me to run barefoot.
And here, I mean, in case people don't know the layout of this transition, it's basically the length of a city block.
Yeah, it is long.
It's a really long and narrow transition. You come in and then you take a hard left and you rack your bike. And if you have a low number, you're at the other end of transition.
Exactly.
So you have to walk your bike all the way down before you get to your stuff, rack your bike, put your shoes on, and then leave, rather than being an AWA athlete of just, hey, here's your bike rack it right here.
Yeah. And then I have to kind of shuffle, because my Achilles and calves and all that. But that's cool. I'm like, it is what it is, and it's just the hand I'm dealt. So I just get through it as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Okay. Now, you get through T2 or T1?
Yep, T2. Yep.
T2.
Yeah, T1 in this one.
Yeah. So you get through it and you get out on the run. The run here is a looped course. It's down by the little stream there, right? And there's a little bit of a gravel path or a rocky path. And you go on this little thing. It's kind of nice and shaded, right?
It was beautiful. Yeah.
So,
again,
how were the first few miles there?
So when I started, I remember seeing T.O. and Butterfield coming at me, and I remember thinking, damn, like they're already 6 miles in. Like I went again because I did no course recon on either the run, and so I was impressed by them, and I was just kind of like, when I start running in all of my races, I don't care if it's hot, humid, hilly, flat, whatever. I really found that what works best for me is if I get on something that I'm not emotional about, and so I really target cadence. Because what I tell myself is if I'm tired or if I'm having a bad day, I don't have to run forward fast, but I'd like to keep my feet moving quick. And speed is a function of how many footsteps are you taking and how long is each step, right? And so I can control, you can stand up right now and run in place with quick cadence, but the velocity would be low. So for me, I just try to focus on the cadence, especially when I'm starting. And a lot of times I try to get my athletes to make that the only screen that they see on their Garmin. And what I found is if you're in hot environments, after a mile, it tends to be about 2 to 4 steps per minute, depending on if it's measuring one or both sides, lower. And whatever it is at a mile, I tell them just try to hold that for the race. And so I have found that I've had my most consistent, best races every time when I'm able to focus primarily on my cadence. And so it doesn't matter to me, the terrain or anything else. That's what I'm focused on.
What cadence do you look for?
I try to shoot for 92. Again, that's back from when I used to look at it from one side. I find that I usually slow down to 90 at a certain point. On hot days, I tend to gravitate to 88. But, what I found was that, especially on hot days, I would have thought prior to run the pace that I had trained or thought I was going to run, which would have ended up in me really slowing down later. And while my cadence was naturally lower in hot days because I was more fatigued or whatever, my pace would be maybe 10 or 15 seconds per mile off, but I'd be able to hold that the whole race. So, relative to the competition, I would do really well. And relative to the other, alternative of blowing up and having 5 or 6 extra miles per minute, or minutes per mile, at the end, it works way better.
Okay. Now, as far as the nutrition plan for the run, what were you wanting to do on the run for a nutrition plan?
So nutrition for me, like I said, it's kind of a sore spot because I fully believe that race nutrition starts with your daily life nutrition. That, I was trying to do the math real quick. I think there's 168 hours in the week. High volume training, I think we could agree, is anything over 20 hours, which, okay, let's say you're training 20 hours a week. There's still 148 hours in the week, and you can't convince me those 148 hours don't matter in terms of how your body processes food or, all this other stuff. So I really strongly believe that race nutrition starts with how you're feeding yourself daily. But with that in mind, I do feel like the more simple sugars that you can get in and assimilate, you're going to do better with. And so for me, every time I race, I know that if I can take 3 gels kind of spread throughout the run, I run better. That being said, I always have to convince myself to eat all 3. I always try to tell myself I can make it up with Coke or whatever, because I don't really like the consistency of gels. But every time I force myself to do it, I run solid. Every time I don't, I don't. So
are these caffeinated gels?
Doesn't matter. Yeah, at that point, it's like just whatever they're handing me. I try to keep it super simple. Ideally, I'd like to have caffeine because it theoretically buffers some of the, pain and all that other stuff. But you need sugar before you need anything else at that point.
Right. Now, you had a run time of 1:35, which is 714 miles?
Something like that.
Something like that. So you're pushing pretty hard in relative terms for most triathletes. And how did this feel for you for the first 4 or 5 miles? Were you?
What? I felt really good. Again, like I'm not kidding. I had to piss like 9 times on the run, and I just because I think from flying, how you get like that bloat from flying a little bit, and because we flew so close to the race, there was that. Plus, literally I live in one of the hottest humid environments in the world, I think, right now. And then I'm racing in at 60 degrees, and my body just didn't know what to do with all this extra fluid. So I was actually running like 640, 650 pace, which for me was like I was super happy with and I remember starting the second loop, and I felt awesome, to be honest with you. If you look at my splits, I think I even picked it up on the starting of the second loop. But I remember saying to myself at that point, like, just at this point, just have a race. Like, there's 10K left. Like, you don't have to be worried about how this is going to go, because again, I was racing on a little bit of some unknown. And whatever, if you blow up with a few miles left, like, you can deal with a few miles, but this is relatively in control now. So just have a crack. And, I used to be friends with Chris McCormick, and he used to coach me. He used to say, hey, if you're not ready to lay it on the line, don't toe the line, and I was thinking about that. I'm like, okay, it's time at this point, it's just time to have a race at this point,
Okay. Now, did you have any GI issues or cramping at all?
No, I haven't since I've squared away my nutrition.
Okay. Now, what was the best part of this run course for you?
The temperature and the change of scenery, I think, was kind of cool, because you'd literally have, a lot of covered shade. The volunteers were amazing. There'd be a little bit of city running. You had a little bit of trail running. You had a little bit where you were switching back and forth. So the mental stimulation and the constant changing was a pleasant thing.
Okay. Now, as far as the run course goes, I know you were on the run course pretty early as far as the race goes, but yeah. Did you see anything funny that really sticks out to you on the run course?
No, I can't. I'd like to come up with something for you, but no, I can't. Nothing that really stands out.
Okay, you don't have to. It's not that big of a deal. Now, whenever you checked into the race, were you given a red
bracelet?
Red bracelet. Yes, that word.
Yes.
To give to a volunteer or somebody on the run course?
I do, yeah, and I usually try to hand that to someone on the run course that first of all, they can't say you're almost there when you first start, right? Because that
That's
I don't
rude.
like, yeah. But usually if they're giving up good cheers, even not only for me, but if they're just being attentive and just in general, like for everybody, it's I kind of am looking for that positive energy person to give it to.
Okay. So do you remember who you gave it to here?
It was some boy who I want to say like second to last at water stop. I was pretty much done, and I tend to not take the water from the last couple of water stations because I'm sensitive to people like my dad that probably are still starting their loops, and I'm like, look, I'm going to be done in less than 10 minutes. I don't really need to take their water, So I usually, instead of taking the water, that's when I usually try to pass it off.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I never really thought about that kind of tactic, because I've never really heard that, because you understand that the people out on the later portion might not have some of that, like
right.
Taking in excess of what you need for sponges. Like
exactly.
That is, yeah. I've been at the back of the pack with my wife, and we even DNF'd a race, and by the time we got around to mile 8, they were out of sponges, and we're like, yep. We're hot just like they were.
Yeah, exactly. Or worse, because it's usually hot. So yeah, I'm always trying to be sensitive to those people and not really use what I don't need.
Okay. Now, how far did you know how to push yourself before you realized that you had gone too far into the hurt locker?
About 2 miles left. I was getting some hip flexor tightness and I want to say Achilles pain, but not bad pain. It's just I'm still trying to build up my run volume, and it's been a process. And I have ran 16 miles this weekend, which was obviously after Santa Rosa, but it was the longest run that I've done in 3 years, and so at that point it was kind of like, okay, I'm ready to be done at this point. Like my body's done well. I'm very, very happy, but I'll be even more happy when we're done here.
Okay. Now you get to miles 10 through 12. How were these feeling for you? Were you in a bad spot at all?
I always say to my athletes that if your sensorium, which is kind of the way you perceive your world and your surroundings, starts to change for the negative, it probably first means that you're low on calories. And that's one of the first signs that you'll get if that is in fact coming up. And so that definitely started to change for me in the last a couple miles where I was like, man, this really seems like it's a false flat all the way. And have I been running uphill? Like, those are the things that you start saying to yourself that you really want to check in with. Do I really want to take another gel on, or have I been light, and that kind of stuff. And if the race was longer than 2 miles left, obviously I would have taken it. But at that point, I was like, let's just get in.
So you understand how to objectively look at your thoughts, it seems like, and realize, okay, hey, this is a bad thought here, and okay, wait a second, this is a bad thought, and because of that bad thought you have, you're like, okay, wait a second. Because I'm having this bad thought here, I am low on calories, and I might need to eat something. But then you base that on, okay, am I close to the finish line because I can deal with that when I get there, or am I at mile 5 and I'm like, okay, I need to fuel. Like, you're not sitting there dwelling on the negative thought. You're just using that as an indicator of your fueling, your overall well-being. You're using that as an indicator.
You got it, man. You nailed it. Exactly.
Okay. Now, the last mile of the run, you're pushing pretty hard at this point. I'm assuming you're pretty much sprinting.
I wish. Honestly, at that point there, I was like, let's just like not fall apart. It's like you want to like tighten up a little bit. Like I'm thinking, okay, I should probably rotate my number in front so they can see me. I make the joke with my wife that I got to run slow enough so that the finished picture's not blurry. I don't want to be so fast that the image is blurred on the film. So yeah, I mean, and honestly, at that point too, it's like the dies kind of cast for my placing, and there was no swim, so the race was only relative to itself. So, I was just kind of like looking forward to finishing at that point.
All right. Now, the last 800 yards before the finish, you're entering the chute. How was this?
Oh man, I like that time is what I try to talk to myself about, telling myself, like, look, in the Marines, I used to tell myself when we would do things that would seem insurmountable, I would have that conversation with myself, like, I'm going to go to bed tonight at the same time, no matter what. And when my head hits the pillow, and this goes back to your motivation question too, when my head hits the pillow, I can have one of two conversations with myself. One is all the justifications to why I gave up or chose not to do it, or two, proud of myself that I actually did the best I could and realize that other people can do it, and why can't I? And so when I'm having rough spots in the race, I put myself on that finish line knowing what that carpet, I know I can say this to you too. You know what that carpet feels like underneath your shoes. It's definitely unique, right? It's a different kind of airflow there with the people around and that kind of stuff. And so for me, it's just always kind of like, yeah, okay, I did this again. I'm like, I'm home again, and it's like, and that's one of those things that I look forward to, because I know I get to stop, obviously, but also, it's just like, it's kind of like, I always say, like, you want to make good deposits in your emotional bank. And one of the things that you can do in order to build trust with yourself is to deliver for yourself too. And it's like, boom, I just delivered this experience to myself again. So the next time I have to draw on that thought, I believe it. It's like I don't know if I'm saying exactly what I'm trying to, but it's like, you give up on yourself enough times, and then you kind of stop believing in yourself. You know what I mean? So it's like, so for me, it's like, yeah, the finishing experience is cool, but also just like knowing that, damn, I just did it. I kept that promise to myself again, and here I am, and it's time to enjoy it. Gotcha. So after the race, what'd you do next? I found my wife, and actually, funny enough, Lindsay Corbin was there, and before I was talking the race with T.O., and Lindsay and I are actually pretty good friends, but T.O. goes, hey, Lindsay, do you know Adam? And she goes, no, this is before the race. She was in total pre-race mode. So I had to stand there. I was totally exhausted, and she was apologizing to me for about 5 or 10 minutes that she forgot, and I'm like, Lindsay, it's really, you're cool. I was just looking for like some food or a Coke or, anything at this point, but she's such an amazing person. She felt terrible. So found my wife, said hi to T.O. We talked about him going to Poland for a little bit, and then found some food, and then, just kind of sat around and just kind of enjoyed the day, waited for some friends to finish. Yeah. So something kind of unique about this series with the Santa Rosa 70.3, this is going to wrap up with one professional triathlete and 3 men, you being the last one. And funny enough, all 3 men that I've interviewed served in the Marine Corps. Oh, awesome. Yeah, so it's something kind of unique that I didn't even plan. I didn't schedule, but sitting here thinking about it, I was like, well, John was a Marine.
Ron was a
Awesome.
Marine, and you're a Marine. So it's like all these things here.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So what's something that you learned about this race experience that you want to pass on to someone else who hasn't done this race before that is experienced in doing 70.3s?
For this race specifically?
Yeah.
I don't think it's worth stressing out going up and getting your bike to the start. Take advantage of the $40 service or whatever, because to have an extra hour and a half in your day where you can keep your legs up and you're not crammed in the car, I think that's really cool. That's important in my opinion. The town is amazing. Like I said, the rough roads is something you definitely want to be prepared for, as well as, I wouldn't say the hills were super bad, but I mean, there were definitely some hills on there, but the biggest thing, at least in the style with the swim being canceled, was the congestion going down the hill for the first mile. I can imagine would be really rough. So just making sure you're not getting aero too soon, making sure you're aware of your surroundings, and keeping the wheel side down for the first couple miles would be huge.
Okay. Now, if you could change one thing about your race and do it over again, what would you actually want to change before you going into this race?
I want to say I went into it probably as sporadically prepared as I ever have. But to that, like, it was an experience that I wouldn't have, just like riding hard, I wouldn't have necessarily chose that for myself, but it was another thing for me to learn that I'm going to be okay. Like, if I can, and it goes back to me telling my athletes all the time, like, consistency is king, and making sure that you stay consistent and you stay on top of your fitness and all that stuff. It's one of those things that really paid off for me. So sure, I would have loved to have swam. I think that it would have put me higher in the placings, or who knows, maybe lower, but I feel like I'm one of the better swimmers, but, I really enjoyed my experience. And as unique as it was, I know I tell people all the time, it's the weird ones you remember, right? Or the tough ones that you remember. So that's definitely going to be one that goes in the memory bank.
Okay. How could Ironman have made your race experience any better?
I think they really did really good with this one, to be honest with you. I think that obviously they can't control the road surface. It's not their fault, I guess, that the venue is so far away from the, I don't like the two transition. I just like to keep logistics really low. But I think the Ironman, I have to say Ironman did a pretty good job.
Okay. For first-timers that are doing the 70.3 distance at this race venue, what advice would you want to give them specifically?
I would say for any first race or first 70.3 or whatever, look, you can't ever do it for the first time ever again. And don't rob yourself of that experience of doing it for the first time. That's one thing I really try to communicate to my athletes. And whether you have a good race or a bad race, you'll have a standard going forward. And, I jokingly tell athletes, you're guaranteed a PR. You just got to get to the finish line, and then there'll be days you can go faster for sure, but just try to control the race, because I'm sure as a coach too, once you control something, you can work from there. Where what becomes hard is where there's no control, or you have to start saying like, oh, well, I did this, but this and this and this and this, now we're back to guessing, right? So, try to get something that you can control under your belt, enjoy it, and don't try to wish your life away. Like I always say, like when you have kids, it's like you say, oh, I can't wait till they can hold their own bottle, or I don't have to like change their diapers. And now all of a sudden it's like my daughter's a sophomore in high school. It's like, whoa, what just happened? So it's like, enjoy the experiences that you're having right now, and, don't wish them faster away,
Right. We covered a lot about your race. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I would say to your title, it got me thinking about, the pursuit of the perfect race. And it's an interesting title because to me, I find what is a perfect race, and it's like, I've definitely, when I nailed Kona one year, I remember thinking, hey man, this was like, I remember being extremely ecstatic and then instantly depressed in a joking way. Cause I'm like, damn, I'm going to have to do everything right again. And also have everything go right again to go faster. And then I've had races where it's like, maybe the race didn't go according to plan, but I've got to follow the lead vehicle, and like that was super cool, right? Or, you know, so it's like I was always curious. I guess that's a question back to you, like, what is a perfect race? You know, how do your listeners define a perfect race? Because I think one of the cool things about our sport is that can mean a lot of different things, right?
It can. And to kind of elaborate on that just a little bit, it's different from every person, and every perspective is a little bit different. Very vague, but that's about the best I can sum it up.
Yeah.
So to talk a little bit more about other stuff, not about the race, what's next for you?
So I decide I'm doing Ironman Florida, and then tell my wife I'm not doing Ironman Florida every 3 days, depending on how busy I get with work and and how stressed I am, you know. But at least at this point in time, I'm planning on doing Ironman Florida, and that'll be my next event. I'm really trying to do some new things, and I'm trying to encourage my athletes to try some new things too, to take themselves out of their comfort zone and, you know, just do some different stuff. So like, for example, here we have an amazing swim event called Swim Around Lido. It's in April. It's a 7-mile swim. It takes place in the #1 beach in America. It's beautiful. You can do it obviously as an entire endurance event, or you can do it as a 2 or a 3-man person. So you can switch up how you want. So if you're thinking about doing your first Ironman, you could get 2 buddies together and everybody can do a 2.5-mile swim. But again, it's just different, right? It's another thing too that you can, you know, with amazing beaches, amazing hotels, you can involve the family, because I think keeping your family engaged in what you're doing is huge. I'd like to do a Ragnar, probably out in Napa Valley again, dabbling in some, mountain bike stuff. But yeah, I think we get sometimes too rigid, right, in what we have to do. And, that's good in some respects, but also it's hard to always have PRs, and I'm not letting everybody off the hook. But again, going back to progress, like with my coaches, for example, I challenge them to learn something new every 2 or 3 years so that they remember what it's like to feel vulnerable and remember what it's like to be a beginner and not take things for granted, you know? And so I think that can translate to the endurance world too. So I'm going to challenge myself and some other athletes to try some different stuff too.
Okay. So you've been to Kona how many times?
9 times.
9 times total. For athletes that are going for their very first time this year, what advice would you give them to have a better day there?
I have never had a good race at Hawaii whenever I've tried to push. My best days in terms of feelings and results have always been where I've stayed inside myself. I've had a very internal race, and I tell my athletes, look, the bike doesn't really start till mile 80. So you really, however you want to get there, you want to get to mile 80 and feel like, okay, it's time for this race to start. And then to that point too, on the run, you need to be extremely internal and not think about anyone else until about the last 10K of the run. And then at that point, you can evaluate how you're feeling, take a look around and see if you want to race somebody. But the difference with Hawaii is it's extremely boring. It's like riding a trainer for, you know, however long you're going to be on the bike. I think it took me 4 or 5 years to start recognizing certain aspects of the course because everything looks the same. It can get really mentally discouraging, not only from the elements, but the other thing too is if you go around to a lot of these other Ironman races, you see a lot of people walking and a lot of people finishing at 13 hours. And, you know, a lot of these Ironmans look like a yard sale, if we're totally honest, like late in the day. My wife, Tanya, who I got qualified for Hawaii, she was shocked. You know, she finished at 11 hours and they were kind of picking up the course, the cones on some of the run. I mean, it was like kind of like to her, like, holy cow, like this is, you know, and she won her age group at Wisconsin by 30 minutes. And so everyone there is fast. A lot of people at mile 20 are still running, you know, and it's like being around that environment. It's different, and being around as many people as you will be around on the swim and the bike, it's different, you know, whereas a lot of times you can maybe separate yourself from your competition. You're going to be around a lot of people, and it's really easy to get caught up in what's going on there because everybody's good. Everybody's won their age group theoretically, right? Or placed very high. So that's different.
Now, what about for the experienced athletes that are going to Kona that have been to Kona before, but want something new that they might not know?
I think that if I was going back to Kona this year again and I wanted to have my best race and have my best time, I would remember what it was like to be a beginner again. And honestly, like my best time there is 9:16. And I know a lot of people have gone faster, but I am pretty proud of that time. And I remember, like, look, here's what I think. And I just kind of like, not to get into a whole nother discussion. I always tell my athletes when you're picking out your races, come up with an avatar in your mind, and that avatar can do every single thing that you want to do perfectly at that race. That avatar can do it. And then take an honest assessment of where you're at and figure out what are the discrepancies that you can't do that that avatar can do, right? And it could be managing the hills or managing the heat or being able to be strong in the back half of the run or your nutrition strategy or whatever. And then I would say, don't worry so much about the race. Go to work on working on those list items. And the time that I've had the best races are when I've gone over there thinking like, okay, I've done everything on my list that I can do. So now I might go to this race, I might get a flat tire, or I might have a bad day. I don't know. That happens, right? But to me, it was more about the process than the actual day. And every time I've been able to go there already satisfied with my race before I've even started it have been my best days. Anytime I've been trying to be like, okay, I'm going to try to break 9 hours this year, or I'm going to try to beat this dude or whatever, it always is a lot more painful and slow.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that little bit of tidbits there.
Yeah.
You've been to Kona. You've done plenty of Ironman. You've done countless half Ironmans. You've been around the world traveling and doing races for quite some time. What races still remain on your bucket list?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've done Leadville mountain bike race, which was one that I wanted to do. I got to do that. I got to do it, but I also had to do it with some corporate clients. So most of the day I had to ride with them. So I think that I would like to at some point go back and see how quickly I can go at that race. That was definitely a lot of fun. I have no desire to do Alcatraz, which probably puts me in a minority, but like, screw that. I just don't need to do it. Yeah, I've done, I looked at doing Roth a few times. But honestly, the flights were so expensive that it was kind of like, I don't know if I really want to do that, but, I'd like to do, there's one I think called Elbaman in Italy, which is supposed to be a half Ironman on this beautiful island. And so I'd like to do some races that incorporate some type of experience, like Norseman would be pretty neat. I think, that kind of stuff too, where it's kind of only relative to itself, and so, I'd love to do some of these partnered swim run races with people. I think that that's super fun because that's something that you can go do and you can travel to, and you don't have the logistics of like bringing the bike and like all that stuff. You can just go, have a good fun time doing something like that.
Awesome. So to wrap up a little bit, how can athletes follow you?
Superflycoaching.com is the best. We have, the Superfly Triathlete community on Facebook. It's a free community where almost daily we're giving people free tips. We get on there twice a month, live sessions where people can interact with me and the other coaches totally for free. Our interest is spreading as much knowledge and goodwill around the community as possible. My passion is that, look, I don't care if you get coached by me or not. Obviously I'd love to coach everybody, but at the same time, I just want people getting good advice. And, that's something that's really, I respect you and I respect your, just listening to you and doing some research on you. You seem like an amazing coach, and any athlete that you coach would be lucky to have you. And that's the big thing is I just want, a lot of people out there are getting really bad advice. And if we could add anything so that they don't have to go through that, because I want them to have the best experience, and I want our profession represented as best as possible.
Wow. And you're also on Instagram or no?
I am on Instagram. I have to be honest. I'm so busy. I sometimes check my Facebook. So Tanya, my wife, kind of runs my social life, but Adam Zucco on Facebook is, obviously a good one, or the Superfly Triathlete community. Anything else, or if it comes through our website, I'm going to get it. Anything else, it's going to be kind of a crapshoot, to be honest with you, because I'm too busy communicating with athletes.
Okay. So I only have one more question for you, and that's, what's your definition of a perfect race?
Well, I kind of turned this on you a little ago, so maybe I went too early, but I mean, I guess I've had it by the textbook where literally that one time, and when I went 9:16 at Hawaii, to preface that, I had never been faster than 10:02 at any Ironman, to include Florida, ever. And for me, I finally nailed my nutrition, and it was an absolute game changer for me. I had DNF'd several Ironmans. I had, like I said, never been under 10 hours, which I'm not saying is a bad time for anybody that, hasn't gotten close. I'm just saying that I always knew I could do better. And so when I went 9:16, I literally took almost an hour off my time in 1 year from Hawaii to Hawaii. And the whole race felt amazing. And at mile 23 or 24, as you're coming up out of the energy lab or whatever that is, I remember walking for about 10 seconds because I told myself, like, hey, let's just walk for a second. And I remember saying, like, dude, you don't have to walk. Your stomach's not upset. You're not cramping. You're not, you're tired, but yeah, you're like 22 miles and you're supposed to be tired. Like, come on, stop feeling sorry for yourself, run. And I finished my run as fast as I started it. And that was amazing. Like, it was just like, I had like Mike Riley. I was finishing by myself. Mike Riley went on for like a minute about me, about my bio, about like how I was a developmental coach of the year for 1 year. I mean, that was pretty awesome, and I would have to say most of my Ironmans have been chasing that feeling again.
Wow. That is great.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Adam, I just want to take a minute and say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience and a lot of knowledge. Like, this is packed with so much knowledge. I took so many notes on throughout this interview. Just thank you so much for sharing everything and spending some time with me today and being a part of the awesome triathlon coaching community that doesn't just rely on numbers, but also understands the athletes involved in that. Thank you for being a part of all of this. Thank you.
Dude, I'm honored that you asked me, so thank you.
Well, you have a good day, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Sounds good, man.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.